As the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of violet and orange, the familiar sense of dread washed over me. I am Jeremy, a night shift security guard at an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. I used to dismiss the rumors about the place being haunted or cursed as urban legends. That was until I started working there, and until I met him. My shift started as usual. The drone of crickets and the far-off hooting of an owl were the only sounds that filled the eeriness. As I sat in my office, surveying the area through CCTV cameras, I couldn't shake off the chill that ran down my spine. Around midnight, as I was taking my usual rounds, I noticed a faint flickering light through one of the broken windows of the factory. Assuming it was a group of mischievous kids, I decided to investigate. As I moved closer, the light abruptly went off. The abrupt silence unnerved me. Cautiously, I stepped inside, my flashlight casting long, stretching shadows against the walls. The air smelled damp and musty, a testament to the building's age. I walked slowly, my boots crunching against shards of glass. As I rounded a corner, I noticed the door to the boiler room slightly ajar, a strange occurrence given that the room was always locked. Tensing, I pushed the door open. There, illuminated under the single bulb hanging from the ceiling, I saw a figure, tall and hunched. He was turned away from me, his head tilted as if listening to the silence. Fear clawed its way up my chest. I instinctively reached for my walkie-talkie, but before I could alert anyone, he turned. His face was hidden beneath a grotesque, leering mask, the sight of which sent chills down my spine. His eyes, though, were the most terrifying, empty and cold, with a madness that froze me in my place. He didn't say a word, just stared at me, a predator assessing his prey. Before I could react, he lunged at me, surprisingly fast for his size. I sidestepped, the adrenaline pumping through my veins allowing me to narrowly escape his grasp. I bolted out of the room and into the labyrinthine network of corridors. I could hear his heavy boots thumping against the concrete floor, a dreadful symphony in the silent night. Fumbling in my pocket, I found my phone and dialed 911. My voice was trembling as I relayed my situation to the operator. She advised me to find a safe place to hide while help was on the way. I turned a corner and darted into a room, a long-abandoned office space. I locked the door and huddled in a corner, trying to calm my erratic breathing. The dim moonlight filtered through the dirty window, casting an eerie glow in the room. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the distant echo of sirens. Relief washed over me. But then, the dreadful thud of boots grew louder, coming closer. I held my breath as the doorknob jiggled, and then a forceful bang shook the door. Time seemed to stand still as I listened to the repeated, terrifying thumps against the door. The old wood creaked and groaned under the strain. As the sirens grew louder, the pounding ceased. A dreadful silence filled the room. The police arrived to find the door to the room I was hiding in smashed open, but the killer had disappeared. They searched the entire factory but found no trace of him. I was shaken, but alive. Days turned into weeks, and the terror of that night started to fade, leaving behind a faint echo. I quit my job and found another during the daytime, far away from the haunted factory. But, every now and then, in the dead of the night, I can hear the dreadful echo of thumping boots. It's a chilling reminder that he's still out there, lurking in the shadows, a nightmarish figure etched into my memory. The experience has left me with a lingering fear of the dark and an unshakable sense of being watched. Even as I write this, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see the leering mask staring back at me. But all I see are shadows, shapeless and fleeting, much like the killer who stepped out of the darkness that night. I can only hope that he remains a shadow, a dreadful memory rather than a terrifying reality. In the tranquil town of Clearwater, there's a popular local legend about the Whispering Lake. The serene, sprawling lake, nestled in the heart of dense woods, is said to have an eerie presence once the sun sets. Adam, an adventurous writer intrigued by local folklore, decided to visit Clearwater and experienced the phenomenon firsthand. He believed the lake's whispers were nothing more than tales spun by superstitious locals. Little did he know, he was about to face an unspeakable horror. Adam rented a cabin by the lake, its rustic charm perfectly fitting his quiet getaway. The first few days were idyllic, spent exploring the town and its friendly community. When he finally approached the topic of the Whispering Lake, the atmosphere changed, friendly faces turned stern, and a chilling silence fell. Ignoring the locals' warnings, Adam decided to stay by the lake after sunset, armed with nothing more than his flashlight, notepad, and undying curiosity. As twilight set in, a cold breeze swept across the lake, whispering through the tall pines, the first sign of something unnatural. As the moon climbed the sky, Adam began to hear faint, distant whispers. Initially, he thought it was the wind, but as the whispers grew louder, he could distinguish words in a language he didn't understand. The whispers seemed to come from the depths of the lake, forming a symphony of eerie voices. Feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with fear, Adam tried to record the strange occurrence. But when he played back the recording, it was nothing but silence, as if the lake was whispering only to him. Suddenly, an otherworldly glow emanated from the center of the lake. The water started swirling as if something were surfacing. Transfixed by the sight, Adam could only watch in horror as an ancient, spectral figure rose from the lake. Its transparent form shimmered under the moonlight, and it had empty, black eyes that seemed to gaze right into his soul. The whispers became a deafening chant, making Adam's head throb in pain. Paralyzed by fear, he watched as the spectral figure stretched out a skeletal hand towards him, beckoning him into the lake. With a surge of instinctual terror, Adam broke free from his stupor and fled back to his cabin, the whispers and the chilling gaze of the spectral figure haunting him. For the rest of his stay, Adam refused to go near the lake, especially after sunset. The once serene lake now seemed ominous, hiding a horrifying secret beneath its calm surface. The locals simply nodded knowingly when they heard his account, their warnings unheeded but justified. Adam left Clearwater, the terrifying memory of the Whispering Lake forever etched into his mind. He realized some legends, no matter how outlandish, often have roots in reality. Even now, when the wind whistles through the trees, Adam hears the faint echoes of the Whispering Lake, a chilling reminder of the horrifying presence lurking in the peaceful town of Clearwater. Ella and James, a young married couple, had recently moved into a charming Victorian house in a quiet neighborhood. The house, although old and in need of some repair, had an irresistible charm, and they were thrilled to start their new life together. On the first night, they were awakened by an unusual, rhythmic thumping sound. Investigating the source, they discovered it was coming from the attic. James climbed the creaky stairs, armed with a flashlight, and was met with an empty, dust-covered room, the light casting grotesque shadows on the bare wooden walls. The following night, the thumping started again, louder and more persistent. Now thoroughly spooked, the couple decided to hire a paranormal investigator, hoping it was just their imagination running wild. Derek, the investigator, arrived with his bags full of tools and devices. He spent hours in the attic, recording sounds, checking for electromagnetic frequencies, and examining the space. However, he found no evidence of any supernatural presence. Just as they were ready to dismiss the noises as a product of the old house settling, the thumping started again. This time, Derek's devices began to flicker and buzz erratically, indicating something paranormal. The air in the attic grew cold, and a chill ran down their spines. Suddenly, a corner of the wooden floor began to shift, as if pushed from beneath. The thumping noise grew louder, the rhythm quickening. Heart pounding, James approached and used a crowbar to pry open the wooden planks, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small, locked box, covered in dust and cobwebs. Feeling a sense of dread but compelled by curiosity, James managed to open it. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, and a worn-out doll with a porcelain face. As he picked up the doll, the room fell silent, the thumping ceased, and Derek's devices returned to normal. The letters revealed a tragic story of a girl named Lily who lived in the house a century ago. Lily was often confined to the attic for misbehavior and had hidden her letters and favorite doll in the secret compartment. The letters spoke of her loneliness, her longing for freedom, and her only friend, the doll. Ella and James were heartbroken. The thumping noises, they realized, were a manifestation of Lily's trapped spirit, trying to make herself heard. The couple decided to honor Lily by creating a small memorial in the attic. They placed the letters and the doll in a glass case and often spent time in the attic, reading Lily's letters aloud, and telling her she was not forgotten. The thumping noises ceased completely after that. The house regained its charm, no longer feeling eerie. Ella and James lived peacefully, but they would always remember the attic secret and the lonely spirit of Lily who just wanted her story to be heard. Their house was now a home, not only to them but to the memory of a forgotten child from a bygone era. Living in a remote, snow-capped town in Alaska, Miles was no stranger to the peculiar and the extraordinary. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to transpire. The tale of the phantom train was a chilling local folklore that Miles had always brushed off as just that, a tale. On an unusually frigid winter night, while making his way back from work, Miles was caught in a sudden snowstorm. The road ahead was becoming barely visible, forcing him to seek shelter in a small, abandoned station nearby, a relic from the town's mining days. Inside, he started a fire to keep warm. As the winds howled and the storm raged on outside, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease creeping up his spine. In the flickering firelight, the station seemed to come alive, filled with echoes of the past. Suddenly, through the blizzard's fury, he heard a distant sound, the whistle of a train. Baffled, as there were no active rail lines around the town for decades, he went to the platform. The sound grew louder, and then, emerging from the heavy snowfall, appeared a spectral train, billowing phantom smoke into the frosty air. Frozen in disbelief, he watched as the spectral train slowed down at the station. The doors creaked open, revealing a carriage full of ghostly passengers, frozen in time, staring blankly ahead, their ethereal forms flickering like aged film reels. A sense of dread washed over Miles as he watched the ghastly scene unfold. Suddenly, one of the figures turned its head and locked eyes with him, its gaze cold and empty. The figure stood up, its movement stiff and jerky, and slowly started to walk towards the open train door. Panicked, Miles retreated into the station, but found himself drawn to the spectacle. As he peeked from a window, he saw the figure disembark and start to walk towards the station, leaving behind a trail of ephemeral footsteps in the snow. Terrified, Miles barricaded the entrance with whatever he could find. He huddled in a corner, watching as the ghostly figure reached the station door, its form becoming more tangible. It seemed to notice the barricade and stopped, turning its gaze towards the window where Miles was hiding. Just when Miles thought the end was near, the spectral train whistle blared again. The figure turned and climbed back onto the train. As the doors closed, the train started moving and gradually disappeared into the blizzard, leaving the station empty and silent once more. When the storm finally subsided, Miles found himself alone in the deserted station. The chilling encounter with the phantom train had left him shaken. He knew no one would believe his tale, yet the terror he experienced was all too real. Miles left the town soon after, unable to shake the haunting memory of that night. The phantom train, the silent ghostly passengers, and the figure that had almost reached him became a chilling testament to the thin veil separating the living from the dead in his once familiar hometown. In the quiet coastal town of Havenport, Carol lived alone in a quaint, two-story house passed down through her family. The house, with its Victorian architecture, was charming and had a beautiful view of the sea. But the peace was shattered when Carol began to notice something peculiar happening in her home. It started subtly, odd noises in the middle of the night, objects moving from their original places, and the constant feeling of being watched. But what truly terrified Carol was the shadowy figure she began to see in her home only when the clock struck midnight. Every night, like clockwork, as the last chime of midnight filled the silence, a shadowy figure would appear at the end of the hallway outside her bedroom. It was tall and thin, standing eerily still and always facing her. Initially, Carol dismissed it as a trick of the light, but the figure became a disturbing nightly ritual, its presence growing more palpable with each passing night. One night, Carol decided to confront her fear. She waited until midnight, her heart pounding with every chime that echoed through the silent house. And as the 12th chime died away, the figure appeared once again. Summoning all her courage, Carol walked towards it, her hands shaking as she reached out to touch the shadow. As her fingers met the shadow, a cold sensation swept over her, and images flooded her mind. She saw a shipwreck, a man struggling against furious waves, and then darkness. As quickly as it started, it ended, leaving Carol disoriented and breathless. The figure was gone. But Carol understood now. It wasn't an intruder but a restless spirit, the spirit of her great-great-grandfather who had been lost at sea. He was a sailor and his ship had capsized during a storm, his body was never recovered. It seemed he had been trying to communicate his tragic fate. Moved by the tragic vision, Carol went to the local historian and confirmed the details of her vision with the town's records. Her great-great-grandfather had indeed died at sea, his demise shrouded in mystery until now. That night, Carol stood in the hallway at midnight once again. As the figure appeared, she softly said, "I understand now. You may rest." With that, the figure seemed to shimmer, then slowly faded away until nothing was left. The nightly visit stopped, and the house returned to its peaceful state. Carol continued to live there, no longer feeling watched. But she would always remember her spectral visitor and the tragic story he shared from beyond the grave. His restless spirit had found solace in being seen and heard, finally releasing him to find peace in the afterlife. Emma, a young historian fascinated by ancient lore and legends, was presented with the opportunity of a lifetime when she was invited to study the history of Wraithmoor Manor. A sprawling estate located in the English countryside, Wraithmoor Manor was a grand old house with a troubled past and a reputation for being cursed. As she approached the manor, its towering Gothic architecture, partially hidden in the thick fog, created a sense of unease. The once grand house was now a shell of its former glory, its walls bearing the scars of time, and its gardens overrun by wild vegetation. Emma was greeted by the manor's caretaker, an elderly man named Alfred. He led her through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing through the silence. The manor was filled with antique furniture, faded portraits, and layers of dust, indicating it had been uninhabited for quite some time. Alfred explained the manor's curse. Each generation of inhabitants had met an untimely and tragic end, usually through a string of bizarre accidents. This had resulted in the manor standing vacant for decades. Emma listened, feeling a mix of skepticism and intrigue. She spent the days exploring the manor and studying the family records. At night, she started noticing strange occurrences. Soft whispers echoed through the corridors, cold spots appeared randomly, and she would often feel an unseen presence watching her. One night, Emma woke to find a spectral figure standing at the foot of her bed. Dressed in attire from a bygone era, the figure bore an expression of profound sorrow. As she watched, frozen in fear, the apparition raised a hand, pointing towards a portrait on the wall, and then vanished. The portrait was of Lady Beatrice Wraithmoor, a beautiful woman with a sorrowful gaze. Her life, as Emma had learned, was marked by numerous tragedies, including the untimely death of her husband and their only child. The following day, Emma discovered a hidden passageway behind the portrait. It led to a secret room filled with Lady Beatrice's personal belongings, including a diary that revealed a dark secret. Lady Beatrice had dabbled in the occult in a desperate attempt to contact her dead child, resulting in a malevolent entity being unleashed upon the manor. Realizing the entity was likely the cause of the tragic incidents, Emma sought the help of a local medium. During a séance, they managed to contact Lady Beatrice's spirit. Tearfully, she explained her foolish actions and expressed her remorse. The malevolent entity she had summoned had become too powerful for her to banish. Following Lady Beatrice's guidance, Emma and the medium performed a ritual to appease the entity. It was a long and arduous process, filled with spectral apparitions and poltergeist activity. However, they persevered, and by the time dawn broke, the malevolent presence was banished. In the days that followed, Wraithmoor Manor was eerily calm. The whispers ceased, the cold spots disappeared, and Emma no longer felt watched. Lady Beatrice's spirit appeared one final time, expressing her gratitude before fading away, finally at peace. Emma left Wraithmoor Manor, her study complete and the curse lifted. The grand old house still stood in the English countryside, now a little less foreboding. Emma knew she'd never forget her time there, the spectral encounters, and the tragic tale of Lady Beatrice. Her experience at Wraithmoor Manor was a testament to her belief that history wasn't always about dates and events. Sometimes, it was about the unseen, the spectral, the haunted, and the tragic echoes from the past that resonated through the halls of time. In the heart of Paris, amidst narrow alleys and quaint cafes, was an antique shop known only to the locals. Its owner, Madame Rosette, was a charming old woman known for her collection of oddities and relics. Among her treasures, one stood out, a vintage music box of intricate craftsmanship. This music box was beautiful, adorned with engravings and delicate inlays. However, Madame Rosette always warned its admirers, beware, for beauty can be deceptive. This music box carries a curse. Despite the dire warning, a young tourist named Michael, fascinated by the old-world charm of the music box, decided to purchase it. Rosette reluctantly sold it to him, repeating her warning, remember, only play it once a day, after the sun has set. Back in his hotel room, Michael, eager to hear the tune, wound up the music box. As it began to play, a beautiful, haunting melody filled the room. He was captivated. The melody was so entrancing that he found himself playing it repeatedly, completely ignoring Rosette's warning. That night, as Michael fell asleep, he was awoken by the sound of the music box playing by itself. Startled, he saw a ghostly figure of a beautiful woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, dancing to the music. Her eyes met his, filled with sorrow and despair. Michael was terrified and tried to leave the room, but found himself unable to move, as if he was in a trance. The ghostly figure started to approach him, her form becoming more tangible. The room grew colder, and Michael could see his own breath. He felt a cold hand touch his, sending a shiver down his spine. Then, the woman vanished, and the music stopped abruptly, releasing him from his paralysis. The next day, Michael hurried back to Rosette's shop with the music box, demanding an explanation. She calmly listened to his story and explained that the woman was once a dancer who fell in love with a musician. He made the music box for her, but their relationship ended tragically when he died unexpectedly. Heartbroken, the woman played the music box day and night until she died from exhaustion. Her spirit was trapped in the music box, forever longing for her lover. Rosette had warned Michael for this reason. By playing the music box repeatedly, he had awakened the woman's restless spirit. He begged Rosette to help him, and she agreed to perform a ritual to set the spirit free. After an intense night of incantations and prayers, they were finally able to release the spirit. The music box played its melody one last time, but instead of a dance of sorrow, the ghostly woman performed a dance of joy and liberation before disappearing. Rosette took back the music box, promising to keep it safe and unplayed. Michael left Paris with a newfound respect for the supernatural and the conviction that some things, no matter how alluring, were better left untouched. And so, the music box remained in Rosette's shop, silent and beautiful, holding within it the echo of a melody from a tragic love story, waiting for the sun to set once again. Marta, a curious and adventurous archaeologist, had devoted her life to unearthing secrets from the past. Her latest venture led her to a long-abandoned manor in the remote hills of Scotland, where generations of the enigmatic MacGuffin family had once resided. The manor had earned a reputation over the years for its infamous labyrinth, known as the Maze of Lost Souls. Legend had it that Lord Alistair MacGuffin, a reputed eccentric, had constructed the labyrinth to contain a sinister entity that had plagued his family for generations. This entity had the power to manipulate memories, driving its victims to insanity. Intrigued by the legend and eager to uncover the truth, Marta began her exploration. The manor was a relic of forgotten grandeur, with its ornate but worn-out architecture giving an eerie sense of antiquity. The labyrinth, however, was astonishingly well preserved. The tall, imposing hedges, intertwined with thorny vines, formed an intricate maze that seemed to stretch endlessly. Equipped with a map of the labyrinth found in the manor's library, Marta ventured in. As she navigated the winding paths, she started feeling an unsettling sensation. The atmosphere grew heavier, and she felt an inexplicable sense of déjà vu. Shadows danced in her periphery, and whispers seemed to echo through the hedges. Ignoring her rising unease, she pressed on, until she found herself in the heart of the labyrinth. There stood a massive stone statue of a weeping angel, its eyes covered by its hands. Marta noticed a cryptic inscription at the base of the statue: "The forgotten past weeps in silence, only to be remembered in the heart of the maze." Suddenly, the whispers amplified into discernible voices, flooding Marta's mind with unfamiliar memories. She saw glimpses of joy, sorrow, love, and betrayal, all seemingly from the lives of the MacGuffin family members. The entity was revealing its true power. Marta was overwhelmed but fought to retain her sanity. She realized that to survive, she needed to release the entity from the labyrinth. Recalling the inscription, she hypothesized that the weeping angel was a symbolic lock, binding the entity. Pulling out a small pickaxe from her bag, she aimed at the statue's heart, praying her assumption was correct. With a resounding crack, the statue split open, and a piercing wail echoed throughout the labyrinth. The atmosphere lightened immediately, the shadows receded, and the voices in her head silenced. Marta hurriedly retraced her steps and exited the labyrinth, feeling an incredible sense of relief. The entity was finally free, and the forgotten memories it held were released, giving the MacGuffin family's past a chance to rest in peace. However, her triumph was short-lived. Marta found herself forgetting her way back to the manor, her memories of the past few hours becoming hazy. The entity, though free, had left its mark on her, erasing her memories of the labyrinth's heart and the secrets she had uncovered. Despite her loss of memory, Marta felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced an ancient, supernatural entity and survived, though the specifics were now lost to her. She left the manor, the labyrinth standing as a silent reminder of her forgotten victory. Marta continued her archaeological adventures but often found herself trying to recollect that particular venture. The details, however, remained elusive, locked away in the labyrinth of her forgotten memories. The maze of lost souls remained a silent enigma, its secrets as mysterious as they were before. Aubrey was a historian with a fascination for the macabre. Her interest in the strange and unexplained led her to Briarwood Asylum. Located in the isolated moors of northern England, the asylum had a dark history dating back to the 1800s. It was abandoned following reports of mysterious deaths, unexplained phenomena, and rumors of hauntings. From the moment Aubrey arrived, she was captivated by the looming structure. The asylum, though worn down by time and weather, retained an imposing grandeur. She was eager to explore and unearth the secrets held within its dilapidated walls. Her exploration started with the administrative offices, which still held records dating back to the asylum's operation. The patients' files told harrowing tales of misunderstood diseases, archaic treatments, and questionable medical practices. Aubrey's curiosity deepened as she ventured further into the asylum. As she explored, she started noticing odd occurrences. The sound of footsteps echoing through the empty hallways, the chilling breeze that seemed to pass through her, the strange flicker of lights even though the place had no power. These phenomena were unsettling but only fueled her determination to uncover the asylum's secrets. Aubrey soon discovered a hidden section of the asylum through a concealed door behind the warden's office. It revealed a maze of underground tunnels leading to a secluded wing. The wing was designed like a prison, the cell's iron bars rusted and covered in cobwebs, indicating it was meant to house the most unstable patients. In one of these cells, she found a journal belonging to Dr. Harold Blackwood, the last warden of Briarwood. As she read the entries, Aubrey learned of a patient named Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a young woman committed by her family due to her unpredictable behavior and violent episodes, which the doctors believed were signs of demonic possession. Dr. Blackwood, intrigued by Elizabeth's case, had conducted numerous unethical experiments in his desperate bid to cure her. However, his efforts only seemed to exacerbate her condition. Soon after, the asylum was plagued with strange incidents, leading to several unexplained patient deaths. Terrified, Dr. Blackwood believed that they had inadvertently unleashed a malevolent force. He sealed off the wing, trapping Elizabeth and the evil presence within, before abandoning the asylum. Armed with this knowledge, Aubrey was determined to release Elizabeth's spirit and rid the asylum of the malevolent presence. She decided to conduct a séance, using an ancient ritual she'd read about during her studies. During the séance, Elizabeth's tormented spirit made contact. Through a chilling conversation, Aubrey learned of the torment Elizabeth had suffered and offered her empathy and solace. Elizabeth, however, warned Aubrey of the evil presence, a demon she referred to as Moloch, who was still lurking in the asylum. With a new sense of urgency, Aubrey conducted a banishment ritual, using the resources she had brought along. As she chanted the incantations, a chilling wind blew through the underground wing, and she could hear the sounds of angry hisses echoing in the corridors. The ritual was long and arduous, and the demonic entity fought against the banishment. It manifested as shadowy figures, violent poltergeist activity, and terrifying auditory hallucinations. However, Aubrey remained resolute and continued the ritual. After several grueling hours, the asylum fell silent. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Exhausted but relieved, Aubrey knew she had been successful. She had freed Elizabeth's spirit and banished Moloch from Briarwood Asylum. In the aftermath, Aubrey documented her findings and experiences at Briarwood. Her research shone a light on the dark history of the asylum and gave a voice to the many souls wronged within its walls. The haunting of Briarwood Asylum remained one of her most challenging and fulfilling investigations. Despite the terrifying experiences she faced, Aubrey continued her exploration of haunted locations. Each location brought new challenges, but the haunting of Briarwood Asylum remained her most significant victory against the supernatural, etching a permanent mark in her memory. In the heart of the bustling city of New York stood an architectural marvel from the 1920s, the Elysium Theater. It was known for its opulent designs, illustrious past, and an urban legend that had attached itself to it, the legend of the Phantom Performer. The theater was believed to be haunted by an entity that often took the shape of a performer on stage. Liam, an investigative journalist with a penchant for the supernatural, found the idea intriguing. The lure of the haunted theater led him to pursue the story for his next feature. He sought permission to spend a week in the theater, intending to debunk or validate the existence of the Phantom Performer. The theater was impressive, with its grand stage and velvet curtains, vintage balconies, and intricate designs. It was like stepping back into the golden age of theater. However, despite the theater's beauty, an eerie feeling persisted, an underlying layer of cold and a sense of being watched. Liam started his investigation by exploring every nook and corner of the theater. He noticed a strange phenomenon: no matter where he was in the theater, his eyes were always drawn to a particular spot on the stage. It was as if the stage was magnetically pulling his gaze towards it. He set up his equipment in the main auditorium and began recording. For the first few nights, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. He reviewed the footage, listened to the audio recordings, and found no signs of supernatural activity. But on the fourth night, things changed. While sitting in the auditorium, he suddenly felt a drop in temperature. The grand chandelier above flickered ominously. Then, he heard it, the soft, haunting melody of a piano. The sound was coming from the stage. Slowly, a spectral figure materialized at a grand piano that hadn't been there a moment ago. The Phantom Performer was a woman dressed in a vintage gown, her face obscured by a veil. She played a hauntingly beautiful melody that filled the entire theater. Liam, though terrified, began documenting this encounter. He could see her, hear her, but his equipment seemed to be malfunctioning, unable to capture this supernatural phenomenon. Just as suddenly as she had appeared, the Phantom Performer vanished, and the melody died down. The piano disappeared, leaving the stage as it had been. The temperature normalized, and the feeling of unease lifted. Liam, determined to understand this entity, delved into the theater's history. He discovered that the phantom performer resembled a talented pianist named Isabella, who had tragically died in the theater during a performance in the 1920s. Her death was a mystery, and she was said to haunt the theater since her demise. Having witnessed Isabella's spirit himself, Liam decided to help her find peace. With the help of a local medium, he conducted a séance on the stage where she often appeared. They reached out to Isabella, offering sympathy and urging her to move on from the theater. They felt a gust of cold wind, a light flicker, and then a sense of calmness spread throughout the theater. After the séance, Liam stayed for a couple more nights. The phantom performer did not appear again. The strange magnetic pull towards the stage had vanished, and the theater felt less oppressive. Liam felt a sense of accomplishment, having given Isabella's spirit the closure it needed. In the end, he wrote a comprehensive piece on his experience, the history of the theater, and the tale of the phantom performer. It made for a gripping read, adding another fascinating chapter to the legend of the Elysium Theater. The theater continued to operate, free from its resident ghost, and Isabella's melody became a tale whispered in the hushed tones of awe and fear, forever a part of the theater's storied history.